My name is Bob Burgess, and I'm the Vice Chancellor of the University of Leicester, that has within it the Richard Attenborough Centre, now called Embrace Arts at the RA Centre. The first time I recall meeting Dickie Attenborough was shortly before I started my job as Vice-Chancellor. I had come over to the university to attend a lecture that he sponsored with Chris Smith, the then Minister of Culture. And Dickie Attenborough introduced the lecture occurred, there were some questions at the end, and then Dickie Attenborough stepped off the platform and started heading towards me. And I thought, what's going on? And he came up to me and he said, "You must be Bob Burgess." I was terribly flattered that he should know me, and I've subsequently thought, it was very clever to find out who I was and then to come and speak to me in that way. And I have to say, I found that there was a huge amount of warmth, there was a huge amount of contact with him in terms of, you felt within seconds, you felt like you'd known him all your life. And I have to confess, it's a technique I've subsequently used from time to time because it's very important, and it says to people that they are of significance to them, and they want to engage, and you want to engage. And that's what I got from that first meeting. And I remember walking out of the hall downstairs with him, and I remember all that very clearly. I thought it was terrifically exciting because I suppose one of my first recollections would be going to see his movie Oh What a Lovely War in London in the late 60s and being terribly impressed with it as a movie. But I never thought I'd actually get to meet the person behind it, and that has proved very exciting. And clearly, one homes in on movies that he's made, and he's always there. He's always, when he's acting in a movie, he's always very much on pace, and you feel you know a lot more about the individual who is there portrayed. You don't usually find that people come back time and time again, that they are hugely committed to it, that they form a great bond with it. That's what Dickie Attenborough has done, because the reason that he grew up in Leicester was that his father was principal of University College, that subsequently became the University of Leicester. And his father was here from the 1930s through to the 1950s. So from that point of view, the connection is through his father. And every time I meet Dickie, and when I meet David Attenborough, I always think that one of my predecessors must have been a really dynamic individual, because given what they're both like, and you can sort of link it together in terms of the way in which there is a linkage through them to their father, and you can see the links that occur in that particular way. In terms of the city, Dickie Attenborough is always very positive about Leicester. But then if you think about Leicester and you think about the values that are expressed in his movies, diversity and equality, that I would always say we're really good at in Leicester, those are values that he holds very dear. They're very clear in the movies. They're very clear in everything he does and he says. It's absolutely a terrific statement, and when lots of things occur in Leicester, Dickie Attenborough is often available with a statement about the work of the city, and similarly the work of the university. He is a great supporter of us all, and it's really good to think of someone of that distinction and who is very distinguished himself has huge amounts of time to devote to Leicester, or rather I should say that he devotes huge amounts of time to Leicester in what is clearly a very busy life. And I know that when I came to the university, I decided to set up a Richard Attenborough Centre Advisory Board, and he said to me, well, I'd like to be on it, but of course you don't need to organise the meetings around me. I will just occasionally fit in. And what he would always do is bring his diary and make sure that he was free on the dates that we had the meetings. So he was always a regular attender at the meetings that we had. And he made a huge difference. He always was aspirational in terms of what we should be doing. He was also inspiring and creative. He also had huge numbers of links which he was prepared to share with you in order that you could get people involved. So the fact that the university has had David Putnam here on a number of occasions, that's the result of Dickie Attenborough. The fact that the first lecture that I came to just before I started in my role in Leicester, Chris Smith was a personal friend of Dickie Attenborough's, and so on. And one of the things that he's very good at is sharing his experience, his knowledge, his friendships, his contacts, his network. All of that is really important. And just as he does that for the university, so he does it for the city. It's very good that in terms of Leicester's City of Culture bid, there's a statement from Richard Attenborough saying how important it is for the city and how he is absolutely firmly behind the bid. That's good for people to know, and it's very encouraging. And I think it's very true to character. One of the things that's always impressed me is the sheer energy and dynamism of the individual. We've sat in rooms in this building when he's come in from London at sort of 1:30, 1:45. He sits and is very active in a meeting until 4:00, and then he tells you, well, he's got to go off to Cardiff to another meeting, and by the way, he'll be going back to London this evening. And schedules like that, when you're in your 80s, is really impressive. Indeed, it would be impressive if anyone told you that they were doing that kind of schedule. But to do it in your 80s is even more impressive. And he has always shared his time and his expertise. That's really important. And I think in that sense, he fits Leicester very much in terms of the values that he holds dear and which are not just there portrayed in the movies, they're actually part of his life. And they actually are part of his life that articulates with things that are important to him. He would always come in the room and he would always kiss everybody. Doesn't matter who was in the room, he'd always kiss them. And I remember I'd sometimes say to new members of the board, now when he arrives, he'll walk around the room and he'll kiss everybody before the meeting starts. And that was one of his characteristics, that was just him. When we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Richard Attenborough Centre, he was held up in traffic on the motorway, and we had a hall full of people downstairs, and the question was, would we start without him or would we wait? And after we'd waited for a considerable amount of time, a message came through, would we start without him? So I started, and I began by introducing the centre and saying certain things about it. And suddenly the green Rolls Royce pulled into the little parking strip in front of the Richard Attenborough Centre, and everybody, as soon as the green Rolls Royce appeared, everybody in the room knew he'd arrived. And that's interesting in terms of associations. And he got out of the car, he came into the building, and I was on a slightly raised platform where all the speakers were going to be. And the first thing he does is walk straight to the platform, come up onto the platform, embraces me, kisses me on both cheeks, and then proceeds to talk to the audience. And if that happened in other contexts, you'd think, gosh, this is all a bit amazing. Whereas with him, you just always know that that's the way meetings start with him, and it's very characteristic of him. And then he'd been on the motorway, he stood there and gave an absolutely phenomenal talk about how he grew up in Leicester and his links with the university. And I think it's that ability to be able to do that, and to be able to talk effectively, to be able to succinctly sum up what it is that you want to say, and to inspire people. Those are great gifts that few people have. He's one of the fortunate few that have all those gifts, and he can use them and use them very effectively.